I told you like a few weeks ago that I suffer from vertigo. So if I'm looking back and forth, I'm liable to get dizzy and pass out. And you're not helping me. We're supposed to cuddle. Come on, get close. Okay, fine. I won't make you do. Oh, thank you, Joe. Joe's doing it. He's going to cuddle. Okay. So we're going through these things called the spiritual practices. We're going to go through it for 12 weeks because there's 12 of them that we're going to be looking at. And we get to one today that's probably one of the more controversial, one of the hardest for Christians to deal with, and it's fasting. And it's one of the more misunderstood spiritual practices. It's one of the ones that we tend to relegate to what we might call like the super religious people. You know, the monks can do it. When I say fasting, you probably think of somebody with a shaved head sitting in a quiet room, you know, meditating or chanting or something like that. See, fasting is one of the culturally sensitive things to do for Christians, and it's one of the most misunderstood, and I want to explore it today. And as we've been going through these spiritual practices, we've been looking at all of them in practice in the life of Jesus, because he really is the best model for all these spiritual practices. He did it all. He did all of these, and he did them all really, really well. And so we've been looking through his life, mainly focusing on the Sermon on the Mount, this famous sermon that he gave. And that's why Lily read from Matthew chapter 6, when he says, when you fast, and I'll get to that in a second, and he gives instructions. But today I want to look at why we fast and what fasting really means in the Christian life. There's the how, there's the why and the how. And to be honest, this could be like a 3-part series of a sermon to talk just about fasting, because it's that important in the Christian life, but it's also that misunderstood and that difficult at times to understand exactly how to do it. Today we're going to focus more on the why, okay? We're going to look at the why Jesus did it, what it was, and what Christian fasting actually looks like. So here, I'm going to set the context for you, okay? Jesus, we open the story with Luke chapter 4. Jesus is in the wilderness, he's in the desert. He just got baptized in Luke 3. And the clouds split open, of course, and God says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And then immediately, God says, hey, Jesus, come over here, come this way. Right, he just baptizes him, and he just says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And then he says, hey, Jesus, come here, psst, come here, come on. You're going to go out to the desert, and you're not going to eat anything for 40 days. And it says that he was hungry, which implies that at least he was drinking something. That he had water, and I'll get to that too in a little bit. Could you imagine this? I mean, honestly, I thought about this. Jesus' response, he's like, wait a second, didn't the heavens just open, and didn't you just say, you're well pleased? And God says, yeah, I did. And because of that, you have to go now and fast. And you're going to go out now and be tempted. I mean, Jesus has got to be like, what are you talking about? Why? What? Well pleased. Now go to the desert. You're my son. Now don't eat anything for a long, long time. But it's in this fast that I want to, as a community, to understand what fasting is in the Christian life, how vitally important it is. It's not just for the super religious. It's not just for the pastors or the missionaries or the monks. It's for everyone. See, the reason why I chose the puzzle as a picture here that we use, because we live our Christian lives, we're all on sort of a spiritual journey. All of us, even if we're not Christian per se, we're all on a spiritual journey of some sort, and we're kind of looking for the puzzle pieces in our life to fit together. We all want calm lives. We all want worry-free lives. We all want to live with no anxiety. And the spiritual practices, what we're walking through, when we put them into practice, they start to do that. The gospel says, if you can put these things into practice, they won't save you. Grace does that. But they will fix you and help you connect with God. Jesus is here is what I'm going to call it a kind of a spiritual highway, okay? He just got baptized. He's ready for ministry. He got his paperwork, he signed, he's good to go. God says, get out there and do it. And he's on this spiritual highway, which is really where you and I find ourselves all the time. And he goes out to the desert here, and Satan comes to him, and Satan's going to offer him exit ramps. He's going to say, listen, you can go on the spiritual highway, but here's an exit ramp. If you take this exit, it'll be easy. And of course, Jesus is not going to take the exit ramps, and I'll look at why and how he doesn't do it. But in order to understand this, first, let me say some things about fasting. I'm going to throw these out there really quickly about fasting before I get into the meat of this message and break out what Jesus is really doing. Fasting in the Bible, it's not commanded. Let's be very clear. There's only a few times that it says you must fast, and that's given to a certain people at a certain time. It is not a biblical commandment, but as we see with Jesus in Matthew 6, it's not commanded, but it's expected. You notice in Matthew 6, when he's talking to his disciples, he says, when you fast. Not if you fast, or maybe you'll fast. He says, when you fast. And furthermore, fasting, in Jesus' mind, is connected not just to the spiritual life of a Christian, but to the giving and to the prayer life of a Christian. Because if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, if you have time to go back to Matthew 6, he says, when you give to the poor, do it this way, this way, this way, this way. When you pray, do it this way, this way, this way, this way. When you fast, do it this way, this way, this way, this way. He's not saying if, he's saying when, meaning that Jesus feels that it's expected in his followers that they're going to fast. It's not commanded, it's expected. There's many types of fast. Don't believe that you have to do it one way or the other. Daniel only ate vegetables and water for a certain amount of time. That was his fast. Esther fasted for 3 days where she didn't eat anything or drink anything, which is not recommended, by the way, to not go 3 days without water. There are other extraordinary supernatural fast in the Bible for 40 days, as you see here with Jesus. There's many types of fast. So anybody who tells you, oh, there's only one way to do this is how you fast, just tell them no. The Bible has many ways. And the Bible has many purposes about fasting. Sometimes it was to connect with God. Sometimes it was to save people. As Esther, when she fasted, she wanted to save her people. Many different ways to fast, many different reasons to fast. But here's one key thing about fasting. It is always, always focused on God. It's always spiritual. You see in Matthew 6 when he says, when you fast, don't do it like the hypocrites. And what he means by this is, in legend, Jewish people would fast for 2 days of the week, and it was almost always the 2 days that the market was open. And they did this because they would go in the middle of the market, and they would disfigure their faces, meaning that they would put like dirt on their face or something to make it look like they were super, super holy and super pious. And they wanted everybody to know that they were fasting. Aren't they good followers of God? Jesus says, listen, that's not fasting at all. That's not the right fasting. The right fasting, nobody will even know you're fasting. The right fasting, nobody will even pick up on it. Only God knows, he says, because it's only spiritually focused. It's 100% about you and God connecting, not about other people knowing about it. And Jesus here, his fast is what theologically we call an extraordinary fast, meaning don't do this at home. If you take anything away from this message today, please take this away. I do not want you to go starve yourself for 40 days unless you are A, the Son of God, or B, you hear the voice of God clearly tell you to do this. If those two things or conditions are met, go ahead, don't eat for 40 days. This is an extraordinary fast, yet in this fast, we can learn a tremendous stuff about our lives. And I'm going to give you an image of an egg, okay? Now, if you take an egg that's raw and you break it open, you're going to see 3 different things, right? You're going to see the shell, the egg white, which looks a little clear when it's raw, and the yolk, right? 3 different parts. And you're going to look at that egg and you're going to say, well, they're not connected really. They're not, you can move the yolk back and forth, right, between the shells and everything. So you say, well, it's not really connected. But if you hard cook that egg, or you hard boil that egg, and some of you know what I'm talking about here. You know that annoying thing when you try to crack the shell and it's all sticking to it? There's, of course, the little trick. You put it under cold water and it's easier to do, but I'm sure you know that trick. But here's the deal. You never know that the egg's connected, all 3 parts, until you hard boil it, and then you realize, wow, these are really connected. And here, we see 3 things connected. See, I don't want to talk just about fasting today. I want to talk about it in context. It's fasting in the context of Jesus showing us something about temptation and self-control. See, Jesus knows that fasting, temptation, and self-control are like the egg. They're intricately connected. And he shows us what we can do about all three of these things, what we can do about tackling temptation, what we can do about showing self-control, and what we can do about what we learn about fasting. And don't you want to learn out how to tackle temptation? Here, Jesus shows you today. Let's delve into this real quickly. Jesus shows us first the gospel in temptation. He shows us the gospel in self-control, and he shows us the gospel in fasting. Here's the egg. Let me break it down for you this way. First, temptation. I want you to, if you have your Bibles, look back at this in Luke 4. Do you notice how the devil tempts Jesus? This is quite amazing. The devil doesn't come to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, let's go to the red light district. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, Jesus, let's go out and get hammered. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, Jesus, you know that part of town that we shouldn't go to? Let's go there. What does he tempt Jesus with? He tempts him with food, safety, and control. Three things that in and of themselves are perfectly fine. They are good. Food is good. You know I know that. You know I believe that. I talk about it almost every week in messages. Food is good. Safety, of course, that's good. Sign me up. Safety is good. Control is good. Power, it's okay. And the last one you may say, well, power is not so good. It sounds kind of bad. But hey, this is the Son of God. I think he's allowed to be powerful, right? See, the point here about temptation that we first have to see is that temptation doesn't come necessarily in the bad things. It comes rather in the good things that are made into the ultimate things. He comes to Jesus and he says, here's food. Food's good. Bread's good. But when it becomes the ultimate thing is when it becomes a bad thing, when it's an angel that becomes a demon. And he says, here's safety. Throw yourself down and the angels will take care of you. I'm telling you, everybody in this room, we all want to be safe and comfortable, and absolutely nothing's wrong with that. But Jesus knows this. It's one thing about temptation that he understands. He understands that it's not necessarily the bad things. That Satan doesn't say, let's go to that place and do some really, really sinful things, Jesus. He tempts him with good things that the Satan wants to make into ultimate things. So this is the thing about, temptation, I know all of us wrestle with it in some form. And it's easy to make it bigger than it actually is. It's like the Wizard of Oz, the movie. You have Oz, which is this huge presence, and smoke is billowing, and he's yelling out commands, and he's angry, and he's this huge face, and Dorothy and all of them are so scared of him throughout the movie, and everybody who comes into his presence is so shaken by him. But then, at the end, what happens? Little Toto runs around the corner, pulls the curtain, and you see that behind all this blustery pageantry and all this fear and awesomeness was really just this lonely fat guy, the Wizard of Oz. See, behind every temptation, every great temptation, is really the good things in our life that we attempt to make the ultimate things in our life. Food for some people, comfort and safety for some people, and control or power for some people. And I guarantee you, all of us in this room, I know you don't like to be labeled, some of you guys, but I'm going to label it a little bit. I guarantee you that if we come into this room right now and we're dealing with temptation of any sort, it's going to be related to one of those three. It's going to be a good thing that we turn into an ultimate thing. It's going to be the molehill that we build into the mountain. And Jesus says, I want none of that. There's a quote I put in your bulletin, or in your outline, from author Leonard Griffith, who's a Christian writer. It's long, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But basically what he says is, he starts off saying, Satan tempts us at the point of our physical needs. Not that we might gratify them to excess, but that we might think of nothing else and satisfy them at the expense of our usefulness in the world. And he goes on to say, Satan tempts us to the point of our religion, not that we might disbelieve in God, but rather that we might demand certainty, the type of certainty that goes without faith. See what he's saying here, Mr. Griffith is saying, all temptation is, what Satan tempts us with, is the ability to numb our senses, the ability to numb ourselves to the world, to take a good thing, to make it the ultimate thing. And the gospel reminds us that we don't have to do this. The gospel says this is the good news. that Jesus Christ came while you and I take the good things, the small things, and make them the ultimate things to worship. He says, I will be the ultimate thing that will become the small thing. I am the king of the world, but I will become dead on a cross for you. And the gospel reverses all of that. It should reverse our priorities. It should reverse what we value. No longer do we value food, which is really just sustenance. It's the way to take care of yourself. No longer do we ultimately value things like safety and comfort and security in our lives. We don't value those things ultimately. No longer do we value the sense of control that we need in our lives. We can let it all go, the gospel says. You can let go of all those temptations. But Jesus doesn't just expose temptation. He shows us a lot of self-control, of course. I mean, he's Jesus. Of course, he's going to have self-control. And I don't think you and I are going to have this level of self-control in our lives when temptation comes. The temptation to control things. The temptation to seek out our own comfort and security and safety first. The temptation to seek out our own sustenance and provide for ourselves. All of those things are temptations. And in the face of them, Jesus pulls a Luke Skywalker. Yes, I did say Luke Skywalker. I'm going to repeat that, a Luke Skywalker. I'm doing a Star Wars reference for everybody who likes the movies, and then I'll give you, for the intelligent literary people here today, I'll give you a literary illustration as well to show you that I don't just watch movies. I do read books occasionally. See, here Jesus looks at the face of Satan, and he says, I'm getting to my Luke Skywalker here in a second. He's able to look at the face of Satan, and he doesn't say, I'm going to put words in his mouth, but he doesn't give in to the temptation. Why? Because he knows that there's something bigger than himself. He knows there's something bigger than the momentary satisfying of his own needs. He knows there's something bigger, and you know what that bigger thing is? It's you and it's me. Theologically, if Jesus gave in to sin in the desert, he would never have been able to conquer sin on the cross. And he knows this. He must know this. He must know, listen, hey, Satan, there's something bigger. If I give in to you now, I'm never going to be able to defeat it on the cross, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand up for something. There is another way. Here's Luke Skywalker. Do you remember this? One of the greatest movies of all time, Empire Strikes Back. Darth Vader, his father, the crucial scene. This is the scene. You guys should all know this. He cuts off his hand, and Luke is on the edge of that, I don't even know what you call it, the walkway, kind of. And he's just holding on, barely holding on. And, he's got one arm, and Darth Vader looks at him and says, if you join up with me, here's temptation, here's the exit ramp from the highway. He says, if you just join up with me, Luke, we can rule everything. Sound familiar? He says, if you join with me, we can rule it all. And I remember looking at Luke, and you're like, no! And then, Darth Vader looks at him and says, this is the only way. It's that one scene, and of course, Luke's hanging on the edge of this balcony, this thing, and you're looking down into the great abyss, and if he falls, he's going to go into deep space and die. And, you're looking at it and going, no, that's not the only way. There's another way. There's something bigger. And, of course, you know that because there's part 3, Return of the Jedi, or part 6, I guess. So you know that there's something bigger. And you're saying, no, Luke, you got to stay alive for part 6. And Darth Vader says, this is the only way. Here's your exit ramp. And Luke says, no. And of course he jumps. See, Luke Skywalker knew this, Jesus knew this. The only way you show self-control is to realize that in the face of temptation, the temptation of these 3 things, good things made into ultimate things, that you and I are able to say, no, there's something bigger. Now, that was my movie illustration for the science fiction folks here. If you want the literary one, here you go. Probably the only part of all of Jane Eyre that I remember, and I love this part. It's when Rochester, of course, they're in love with each other, Jane and Rochester, and she finds out that he's a married man. And he says to Jane, well, what I'll do is I'll make you my mistress. Here's your exit ramp off the highway. I'll make you my mistress. And it was a common practice. You'd have a mistress living in a house, and he had his dutiful marriage that he had to uphold. And they're going back and forth, arguing about this. And he's saying, Jane, just do it. You have no family to worry about. You don't have to worry about anybody else. No, you can be my mistress. You can do this. Here's Jane's exit ramp. And in one of the more famous passages, and I put it in your bulletin, she said, I was experiencing an ordeal. A hand of fiery grasped my vitals. Sounds like temptation, does it not? Terrible moment. full of struggle, blackness, burning. But then she says to Rochester, I'm not going to take that exit ramp. She says, I will hold to the principles received by me when I was sane and not mad as I am now. Laws and principles are not for the times when there is no temptation. They are for such moments as this, when body and soul rise in mutiny against their rigor. And at the end she says, preconceived opinions, foregone determinations are all I have at this hour to stand by. There I plant my foot. I plant my foot. See, Luke knew it. Jane knows it. Jesus knows it. The only way in the face of temptation to ever get through it is if you and I start to realize that there's a bigger picture. We're part of a grand narrative. We're part of a bigger story. There's no need to take the exit off the highway. We have to stay on the highway. We plant our foot. There is another way. To take the ultimate things that we made in our life and realize that they're not the ultimate source of our joy. Jesus knows that on the cross, he's going to face the ultimate temptation. Do you remember this? When on the cross, the people mocked him and they said, if he truly is the Son of God, let him save himself. That's an exit ramp. Jesus on the cross, do you know that he gets the three things that are completely opposite to what Satan offers him here? Satan offers him bread. On the cross, remember, he gets the bitter vinegar. Satan offers him safety. On the cross, he's spread out to die. And Satan offers him power and control, and on the cross, he's losing all of that for you and for me, so that when you and I face the temptation of power and control, of safety and comfort, of seeking out our own sustenance above anything else, when you and I have those temptations, we have the cross to look to as an example of one who gave it all up so that we can plant our foot. Now, all of that, and now I get to fasting. And you're probably thinking, do I have another 30 minutes to go? No. I'm going to make, this is short. The reason why I didn't get into fasting at the beginning is fasting freaks people out. And I get it. It scares people. If I stand up here and I say fast, it makes me either sound like I'm telling you to be religious and pious and legalistic and that'll get you into heaven. No, it won't. Or it sounds like I'm just saying you're a bad Christian. You should really be a better Christian and fast. No, I'm not saying that. Do you realize here that the way Jesus prepares himself to deal with these temptations, he's hungry. He's able to give up something. He sees the bigness of what he's going to do on the cross. And he's able to fast. Now, I've been giving you guys homework assignments every week to put these practices into practice, to actually do it. And here's what I'm going to say about fasting. Fasting can come in any of these three forms. You can either fast. Most people fast from food. But maybe in your life right now, you need to fast from the need to always feel comfortable and safe. You need to fast from building up your own security. Maybe in your life right now, you need to fast from the ability to have to control everything. Jesus was offered power and control. He fasted from it. He was offered comfort and safety, and he fasted from it. He was offered sustenance and his own well-being, and he fasted from it. He's the perfect model. And when you and I fast from whatever it is, when you take a break from something that's cutting control of your life right now, when you look at something that you've made into an ultimate Lord and Savior, instead of Jesus, when you take that and you say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of it for a day, for 3 days, for a week. It may be food, it may be your smartphone, it may be, I don't know what it is, maybe your computer, I don't know. You can get rid of it. And when we do, you and I, when we fast, we connect with the spiritual narrative that is the gospel. We connect with the only Lord who fasted himself. Jesus saw it so important that he was willing to forego food for 40 days. He was willing to be tempted for you and for me. Andy Stanley, who's a pastor that I really respect from the United States, has an interesting, he did this long series on temptation. Look it up if you can, it's great. He said something very interesting about temptation in there that struck me, and he says this: your ability, meaning you and me, Your ability to deal with temptation has a lot to do with your ability to trust God. Think of how powerful that is. Your ability and my ability to deal with temptation has a lot to say about our ability to trust in God. And what he means by this, let me give a real example. If you're addicted to food and you can't go without one meal, it's probably because you don't trust God to provide the next meal. And Andy Stanley goes on to say, listen, if you can't go without, that one thing in your life, that one thing you cannot get rid of, it's because you're not trusting God when you get rid of it to be the God that he says he's going to be for you. He says you can't deal with temptation because you can't ultimately trust God. And the gospel tells us this: we have the only God who we can ultimately trust and have confidence in, because he's the only God who gave himself up for us. He's the only God who tempted like you and I are tempted. Doesn't that give you confidence? You can trust him with whatever you have. You can give it away, and he'll still be there. You and I don't need to take the exit ramps on the highway, because it was Jesus who didn't take the exit ramps for us. On the cross, he could have left. He could have done anything else but die for us, but die he did. And because of that, he says there's no temptation too great. There's no amount of self-control that you can't show. There's nothing in your life that you cannot get rid of, because I gave rid of everything for you. Now, that's fasting. That's why. We fast because in fasting, we become spiritually aware of the things that have captivated us. Give it a try this week. Think of the one thing, maybe there's more. Think of the one thing that you would say, Darth Vader would look at you and say, there's no other way, and you have to look at him and say, there is a way. Think of the one thing that Rochester would look at you and say, just do it, and Jane Eyre, you would say like Jane Eyre, no, I plant my foot. Think of that one thing that you've made into the ultimate thing that's controlling you right now. It's going to be one of those three that I talked about, and you can get rid of it. The gospel says you can, because on the cross, Jesus emptied himself out for you and for me. Now to conclude, I wish I could get into the how you fast. I put books on your outline. I got really practical here. There's some reading that you can do about how to fast. Let me say this as I close really quickly. Again, I'm not saying for anybody to go not eat for 40 days. Don't do it. Fasting is a practice. It is an exercise. You need to study how to do it. But it is not commanded, it's expected, and it is a joyous experience to do it. But look at this. No casual jogger ever woke up and ran a marathon. You don't do it overnight. Take your time. Read these books. But know this, it's gonna be a little painful. Whether you fast from food or whether you fast from your phone or your computer, whatever you fast from, it's going to be painful. But I put a quote in here from Dietrich Bonhoeffer to talk about grace. And grace is free, but it's not cheap. And he says it's free because it came through the death of the Son, but it's not cheap because it came through the death of his Son. If you and I can start to realize that God's grace is free for us, but it is not cheap because it cost the very life of Jesus, then fasting can become a joy. It's not a burden, it's a joy. Bonhoeffer says, above all is costly grace is, because it cost God the life of his Son. Ye were bought at a price. And what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace, because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life, but delivered him up for us. If you decide to fast, and I encourage you to, know why you're fasting, because of the gospel. And know that it became at the cost of this grace. And it becomes less of a burden and more of a joy. Please pray with me.